Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. Well, today I'm going to talk a little bit about dehydrating and show you just a few of the things that I have dehydrated over the years and why I like to dehydrate. Now, let me start by saying that whatever method of food preservation that you choose, you've got to decide what's best for you. There's no real one best method that's all around good for everything form of preserving your food. It's going to depend on the food, it's going to depend on your needs, it's going to depend on how long of a shelf life you want it to have and how you want to prepare it when you go to use it. So I will do different things. I might take one thing and preserve it a few different ways, such as blackberries. I've dehydrated blackberries, I've frozen blackberries, and I have canned blackberries. They all have their benefits. So today I just simply want to talk about dehydrating. I do all of these things and fermenting as well, but why I like to dehydrate, let's just talk about this today. Now, I don't have a freeze dryer. That's a totally different thing. Some people don't understand that dehydrating and freeze drying are different things. They both involve drying the food and removing the moisture from it, but they work very differently and they also yield a different result. Dehydrating tends to change the flavor, where freeze drying, you're more apt to preserve the flavor and it will taste fresh. It's just dry and it also has a different texture. It's very crispy, as opposed to dehydrating, especially when you're talking about fruits and certain vegetables, can have more of a leathery type of texture. Now your herbs should all dry up very crispy. There's no need for freeze drying herbs. I'm not sure about this, but I think freeze drying might preserve more of the nutrients than regular dehydrating. Now, one of the things I do like about dehydrating is that, especially when it comes to my herbs and my really highly nutritious stuff like kale and things like that, I definitely prefer dehydrating over canning, because dehydrating is going to preserve more of the nutrients than canning will. You'll lose a lot more in canning than you do in dehydrating. And yes, you still lose some in dehydrating, and how you dehydrate, how high you set the heat is going to also determine how many and what types of nutrients you use. For example, sun dehydration is you're going to lose more of your vitamin A with sun dehydration rather than dehydrating, let's say, in an electric food dehydrator. So these are different things you have to take into consideration. Now, I'm not going to list off all these things, partly because I'm not going to remember them all, but I will put a link down below if I remember to find it, that gives you kind of a list of the different types of vitamins and minerals that get leached out depending on the form you use for dehydrating and whether or not you blanch it. Now, apparently blanching your foods before dehydrating is going to be one of the better ways to preserve even more of the nutrients, but even that can be different from food to food and nutrient to nutrient. So it's just going to depend on what you want to do. Now, for me, I do not like blanching. Every time I try it, whether it be blanching before freezing or blanching before dehydrating, I am never happy with the result. To me, it seems like taking that extra step just is not worth it. So let's talk about some of the stuff I have here. Now, right here is some tomatoes from my garden from 2017. These are just chopped and then dried. I use a little bit of oil. Avocado oil is going to be preferable for long-term storage as opposed to olive, especially if it's going to get hot at all. And so I'm dehydrating it with heat. That's why I'm going to use avocado oil, because it can handle heat better. And I just do that with the tomatoes. I don't do that with anything else. I just get a better result using the oil. I do have a video on just dehydrating tomatoes like this, and I'll go ahead and link to that up here. That one's probably about 2 years old. And then I have, last year I started another way of dehydrating tomatoes. They each have their own uses, and that is by dehydrating them in the form of flakes. And I have a video on this as well that I did last year, and I'll link to that right up here. Now this can be ground up into a powder if you want. I just don't bother because I'm using this more as a thickener for my spaghetti sauces, chilies, barbecue sauces and stuff. So if I take a jar of home canned tomatoes, add some of these tomatoes, it'll just thicken it up without the need of cooking it down for so long. And I would think you could also make tomato soup out of these. I haven't done it yet. I like tomato soup myself, but Mr. Rain doesn't, so I just never make it. But anyway, jalapenos is another great one that I love to dehydrate. They dehydrate up very nicely, and they're so easy to just grab and to throw into whatever I want to add a little bit of kick to, especially when it comes to soups and stews and things like that. Or, you know, chili, if I'm making a big pot of chili. These are really good for adding to that. Now, I've got a lot of flowers that I dehydrate, like the rose petals, the dandelions. Let's see here. I've got nasturtium flowers. Let's see, what else? My pansies, calendula. These are actually from 2017. My calendula, as the time that I'm shooting this video, is only just started really producing, so I'm getting some dehydrated up, but I don't have much to show you yet. These things are going to be used more for things like using to infuse my oils, for using in my skin creams, my lip balms. They can also be used in making teas if one likes. I like to use these a lot in making my herb soaps. So if I have like a dandelion lemon soap, I'll throw the whole dandelion flower in there and then process it up into the soap. And the nice thing about adding these different things is not only are they good for your skin, it just gives the soap a little bit of texture, so it makes it very scrubby using it as is. You know, calendula is very good for the skin, and nasturtium is supposed to be really good for hair health and hair growth. The nasturtium flowers, that is. Now, when it comes to certain other herbs, such as nasturtium leaves, not very much in here because I just got started and I used up all the ones I dehydrated up last year. Let's see, comfrey. This is another good one for skin, for making ointments, salves, and stuff like that. Marshmallow, another one I like to use for salves, but also has many other medicinal properties. Oh, catnip, feverfew. I don't have everything out here. Echinacea. Where's my echinacea? Echinacea right here. This is from last year. These things I like dehydrating up because these are my more medicinal herbs, and so I'm going to be using them for making tinctures and or extracts, and for taking for different kinds of illnesses and stuff. And the echinacea I like to add to my cough, cold, and flu medicine. Now, I did do a video on that, and I don't remember if in that video I had started adding the echinacea to it. But I'll go ahead and link to the video up here so you can see it. And if I don't have that in there, echinacea and marshmallow are a couple of excellent ones to add to that, because marshmallow in particular is very soothing to the throat. And then the echinacea, as we all know, is really good for helping to fight and prevent colds and flus. So I like to dehydrate up medicinal herbs for that purpose. Most, you know, so that I can tincture them, so that I can extract them, and then use them for medicinal purposes in that way. You know, like the catnip and the feverfew I like to use for my headache remedy. And I'll be talking more about more tinctures and extracts and how I do them in future videos. I do have some older videos, but some things have changed a little bit in the way I do some things. You know, we all kind of grow and morph things as we go and as we learn. And so some of my earlier videos, I was still pretty new to understanding tincturing and extracting, and I've learned a lot since then, thanks to people like Amy Fuel. She has an excellent book, and Rosemary Gladstar. And the more I learn, the more I start implementing these different things. But I still have my own style and way of doing things, and I like to come up with my own recipes. Now, other things that I use both medicinally or just for the sake of drinking a nice tea would be like the mints, all the mints from my garden. And I try to get several jars of just mint. I already have, this is one I'm working on filling up, I'm getting there, and I already have a couple more full, and I will hopefully have a couple more. Marshmallow I really like in tea, as I do lamb's ear. I think this is my third jar of lamb's ear, and yeah, so lamb's ear, I like adding it to my tea blend, but I also like keeping some separate if I just feel like having a lamb's ear tea, because I like the very mild flavor of it. Stinging nettle, things like stinging nettle, borage, kale and red mustard, grape leaves, and that kind of stuff I like to use for adding to my mixed greens blend. And again, this is just some of the things that I dehydrate up. So dehydrating these and then blending them together in just a real nice, very highly nutritious mixed greens, I can take that and add it to just about anything, especially for those people. We're not super picky, eaters around here, but let's say you have people coming over that might be picky, you have kids that don't like kale or some of these things, but you want to make sure they're getting all the good nutrients of the dandelion leaves, because that's in my mixed greens too, and all that great stuff into their foods. Well, dehydrating will help subdue the bitter flavor of things like their dandelion greens and just the flavor in general of stuff like kale and stuff. So people who don't like that, it not only subdues it, but you can powder it or just flake it up like I do and add it into dishes, and it's pretty well hidden as far as flavor. I never notice a difference in flavor unless I add a whole bunch. I've tried adding tons to something one time just to see, and it took quite a bit before I actually noticed a difference in flavor. And when you think something's dehydrated, it's shrunk down a lot smaller in most cases than it was, and so it's you're getting quite a bit. If you put a handful, you're actually getting quite a bit. That might be like 3 or 4 handfuls of the fresh vegetable. So, and borage, by the way, I talked about this in another video, is one of the ones I'm going to start adding to my mixed greens blend, because I can't remember if I did it last year or not, but I definitely want to get that in there. So I'll have a jar for adding to that, a jar for using for medicinal purposes, for making soaps and different things, and then another jar maybe for tea. Okay, let's talk a little bit about apples. Now, I do plan on doing a separate video just on dehydrated apples sometime down the road, probably more like in fall, and all the many uses for dehydrated apples and why you should dehydrate your apples. This is my favorite way to preserve apples. I do like to make apple butter. I have a video I did last year of all the different ways I like to preserve apples, and I'll go ahead and link to that right up here. But I'd like to talk at some time just about dehydrated apples and all their many uses. But I'll talk a little bit about that right now. And one reason I like to dehydrate the apples is that you can put so many apples in 1 quart jar. And I like the way they turn out better than when I've canned my apples. And I can get a lot more in here doing it this way rather than doing the canning method. Maybe you could only get a couple of apples in here, where here I might have 5 apples or 6 apples in this jar, depending on the size of the apples. And this can be used to make pies. I've made dried apple pie. I have a video on how you can do that right up there. You can powder it up if you want and use it for flavorings. You can break it up. I've broken these up into just smaller bits and thrown them into oatmeal. I've used them for making water kefir. Really just makes a great water kefir, because you're getting that flavor in there. Throw a cinnamon stick. Do the same thing when you're making tea. Throw a small handful of your dried apples and a cinnamon stick into a pot of water and let it cook a little bit, and you'll have a cinnamon apple tea that's just delicious. It was cheap to make. You didn't have to go buy some expensive tea bag down at the store. You just using your apples from your own tree that you preserved, and you may have to buy the cinnamon sticks, but by the way, I'll go ahead and link down below to the organic cinnamon, or the Ceylon cinnamon sticks that I like to use. And I go a little sparing on that since it is something I have to purchase, but it is really nice for some extra flavor. And by the way, when you're done making that tea or that kefir, take those cinnamon sticks. the spent ones, and just throw them out in your garden, and they will help to prevent certain garden pests from eating your plants. I just toss them out there wherever I think they're most needed, and just let them do their thing, and they'll break down and all that. Now, another thing that I dehydrated up several years ago, and I keep forgetting I have it, is I have several jars. This is one I just recently opened and started using, of dehydrated rhubarb. Now, this is one of those things that, well, you're supposed to blanch it. I tried blanching it, and I did it right according to the instructions, and it was really messy. It stuck to the dehydrating tray so badly. I hated it so much. And so what I did, just to experiment, is I just tried cutting them up raw, putting them on the dehydrator trays, and drying them. They dried faster and cleaner, and now I'm starting to put them to use. I will be finding out how well these may work in making, let's say, a pie or anything where you want to cook them into it, or just rehydrating them and using them and making like my creamsicles, because I like adding a little bit of rhubarb to the different fruit creamsicles I make for mostly Mr. Rain, because there's so much vitamin C in it that I just think it's an excellent choice. Now, here's one thing I'm trying right now with the dried rhubarb. In fact, this is all dried stuff, and this is my recent just started water kefir. Look at the color of it. I didn't use coconut sugar in this one, by the way, and all that yellow color is from all the things I stuck in there. So I've got dried lemon slices right here. I just dehydrated up a bunch of lemon slices and threw those in there, and this was yesterday I started this. And then the rhubarb, and then a few pansies in there for color and just some health benefits, because the pansies will add a very mild flavor, but it's very mild that probably won't even notice it because of the lemon and the rhubarb. So this should be a rather tart one. We'll see how it turns out. I'll be trying it later today, and I really like the way the color turned out. I just now noticed it because it's been sitting down here on my dark counter and kind of shaded, and I didn't realize how yellow it was. But anyway, this is one of the many things you can do with your dried fruits, is use it to flavor water kefirs and teas. Blackberries are another really good one. They dehydrate up really nice if you don't mind the seeds, which we don't. I love the seeds. There's so many good nutrients in the seeds, but I know not everyone can have the seeds for various reasons. However, I've dehydrated blackberries up and then put those in oatmeal or other types of hot cereal, and that's really good. So I'm probably going to be dehydrating more blackberries this year. And one thing I've never dehydrated yet is blueberries. I always end up freezing them, but this year I'm going to go ahead and dehydrate some and put them up and give them a try and see how I like them. I just have, part of the reason I haven't done it is I'm afraid I'm not going to like the flavor of them as well, because when it comes to a lot of the fruits, I like freezing them best because I think they hold their flavor the best that way. But I want to give it a try with the blueberries like I did with the blackberries, because some things seem to taste like the blackberries still had a really great blackberry flavor once they were rehydrated into the cereal. Oh, and of course, if you watched one of my last This and That videos, I had a thing on there about dehydrating berry leaves, and so that's one of the things I got going on here for adding to my tea blend. And then there's, man, you know, I could talk for a very, very long time about dehydrating on all the many uses, but I've dehydrated so many different things from fruits to vegetables, and I just can't pull everything out. But dehydrated bananas, the ones that you do yourself, are really good. I haven't done a lot with those as far as cooking with them. Those to me are something I like to just snack on right out of the jar. So if you got a good deal on bananas somewhere, you just slice them up. Now, one thing you can do if you don't like them to turn brown at all is you can coat them with a little bit of some kind of juice, like a lemon juice or orange juice, and that will also help preserve the nutrients better while it's dehydrating. I used to do that, but it's another one of those things where it makes the drying process take a lot longer, and it's a lot messier. It's harder to get them off the trays. I just usually slice the bananas up, put them right on there, and I actually like them better that way. I just think they're good. I love to snack on them right out of the jar. Some other things to consider, and I've done this before just for fun, is taking your peach peels. You know, you get your peaches, you're canning them up, and take your peach peels, if you don't want to turn them into vinegar because maybe you already got lots, then take them and just sprinkle a little bit of some kind of healthy sugar, you know, the healthier sugars, you know, such as like a coconut sugar or something on each side, and dehydrate them, and then you got kind of a candied peach type thing. And those are good to snack on right out of the jar as well. So that might be one of those things that could be a good comfort food to try out. Some other things I really like to dehydrate is carrots, even though I usually break down and buy my dehydrated carrots from Mother Earth products. If I get a really good deal on fresh carrots from the store, I just don't go to the store that often, but if I happen to go and see, oh wow, it's a really good deal, some organic carrots, then I would like to dehydrate those up, especially if I can get a good deal on organic rainbow carrots. Those are so beautiful to add to soups and different things like that. They cook up so nice, and they add so much color, and they turn out really good, especially when added to soups. And I also like adding dehydrated carrots to a lot of my Italian sauces, depending on what I'm using them for, especially if they're going on spaghetti. Now, right here I have a basket of a few of the things I harvested from the garden. I just did kind of a willy-nilly pick today, only to show you just some ideas. So you've got radishes. These greens are edible. You can dehydrate these up, and I have, and add those to a mixed greens blend. Here's some dandelion leaves. Of course, I've got the red mustard, not radicchio like I thought it was for years. It's actually red mustard. Thank you for telling me that. I always wondered. I didn't think that was quite right, but anyway, one of my favorite things to dehydrate. There's some fresh dandelion flowers I'm going to dehydrate up. And another thing that you can dehydrate, I've got some borage leaves in here. There's also all your herbs, you know, your rosemary, your thyme, your oregano, your basil, all that kind of stuff. But another thing that dehydrates up really nice are snow peas. I've done this, and I'll be doing a separate video just on snow peas and how I like to preserve them. But dehydrating is one of the ways that turns out really nice. You can store them in your jars, and if you want to add some snow peas to anything, especially if it's something like a soup or a stew, and you just like the idea of the snow peas in there, just grab a handful, throw them in there. They turn out really, really good. And then the last thing I want to say about dehydrating, and again, people, this is just a fraction of the things I've dehydrated, but is sealing them, vacuum sealing them, like this right here is all sealed nicely with my brake bleeder. And I did just do a video on only how to vacuum seal into your jars, because I get a lot of people asking me that, and since I never had a video just on that, I finally did that. So I'll link to that video right up here, because it's really important to know there's two different ways that I use. Actually, there's only one that I use now, but there's another way I used to use it. I show them both in that video, and how you can vacuum seal all your dry goods, whether it be your beans or anything, into your jars, and they will last for a very long time on the shelf, as long as your jars don't lose their seal. So it might be a good idea to check your seals every now and then, because every now and then I'll have one. Well, this is not sealed because I just opened it, but that's how you can tell. You just press on it. If it does that, you know it's not sealed. But the good thing about it is when it's dehydrated, as long as you check it every now and then, it's already dehydrated. It can last a really long time just like that without being vacuum sealed, but vacuum sealing will keep it for even longer and keep it fresher that way. So it's a really good method to use, and go check that video out so you can learn how to do it for yourself. And then one last thing I want to say before we go is actually something I want to ask of you, is to go ahead and share with us your favorite things that you like to dehydrate and your favorite ways of using them, so that we can either go, yeah, I do that too, I love doing that, or we can go, wow, that's a really great idea, so that we can all learn from each other. It's always fun getting new ideas on how to dehydrate. I mean, that's how we learn, right? We learn from each other. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something new. Thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.